This is Steve Zeltzer with WorkWeek on Pacifica. This is the week of the convention of the Republican Party. And this week, Sean O'Brien, the international president of the Teamsters, went to the Teamster convention and spoke and said that the union should consider both the Republicans and the Democrats, and that he said to the convention that they should do right about labor. And this is a convention funded by the biggest union busters in the world, companies that have been fighting unions in the South against legislation to protect workers at OSHA. And yet he appealed to them to do the right thing and support working people, and used the offices of the Teamsters previously to invite Sean O'Brien to the headquarters where Trump gave a press conference to the lobby of the Teamsters. He also went to Mar-a-Lago, and he is basically saying that people should consider both the Republicans and the Democrats in this upcoming election. And at the same time, he on the stage was J.D. Vance, who's been supported by the billionaires, Peter Thiel and Elon Musk, who now says he's going to contribute $45 million a month to the Trump campaign. And this is Elon Musk, who fired 700 workers at the Tesla plant in Fremont who were trying to organize a union, has a record of union busting and racism, has been sued, and workers, black workers, have called it the plantation. They won millions of dollars because of the discrimination, systemic racism in the plant. And it seems that this issue of racism is not at all a concern of Sean O'Brien. And joining us today is Tony Cochran. He's a member of Teamsters Local 162. He is a UPS worker and has talked about not only Sean O'Brien and his role, but also the rise of technofascism and the danger of that. So welcome to our show, Tony.
Thank you, Steve.
Tony, as you know, John Palmer, Richard Hooker, there have been Teamster officials who have said that Sean O'Brien should not go to the Republican convention. Apparently, he ignored that advice. And at the convention, he said those were leftists in the union who were saying he shouldn't go, and that he wasn't going to take their advice. But actually, what is your view of what Sean O'Brien's going to the convention means for Teamsters and for working people?
It's a very dangerous moment. I wanted to say in the first interview that you and I did, we discussed a young worker who talked about massacring trans people. And the way in which that worker here, where I work at UPS, Local 160, represented by Local 162, proud UPS Teamster here in Portland, Oregon, that young worker reflected the larger far-right movement of fascism in the country. And we talked about fighting that on the shop floor all the way up to fighting these issues with Sean O'Brien. Now, Sean O'Brien went and spoke at the Republican National Convention at a very dangerous moment for LGBT people, in particular trans people who are under attack throughout the country, and in particular, any type of civil rights or decency, because, and this word gets overused, I think people say, oh, you say fascism, what does that even mean? Well, let's just talk about what fascism actually is. The definition of fascism is, quote, a far-right, authoritarian, ultra-nationalist political ideology and movement characterized by a dictatorial leader, centralized autocracy, militarism, forcible suppression of the opposition, a belief in the natural social hierarchy, and the subordination of individual interests for the perceived good of the nation. That pretty much sums up Trumpism. And it's accelerated with the appointment of J.D. Vance as the vice presidential candidate, who we know comes out of the Silicon Valley money nexus. He was Peter Thiel's boy. Peter Thiel, who is one of the founders of Palantir, which is a terrible weapons and defense, quote unquote, defense contract company that has used its technological advancements in killing people throughout the world. And Peter Thiel, being a right-wing nationalist, now has put his money behind his candidates. And we have Musk lining up there. And today, Rupert Murdoch will be at the Republican National Convention. Um, I think it's important because in the speech, Sean O'Brien said, quote, elites have no party, have no nation, unquote. What I find interesting about that, this is straight out of Hitler's playbook. The idea that these stateless elites that only care about money harkens back to some of the darkest days of the 20th century with anti-Semitism. Now, notice that he didn't talk about the elites in the room that actually have national interests vested in America first nonsense that are using fascism and nationalist rhetoric. He talked about these elites that are supposedly stateless and have no nation and no party, but the elites definitely have a party and they have a nation. They live in the United States, or they don't have a party, and in which case you're talking about people like Rupert Murdoch, who is from Australia. So I don't know what elite Sean O'Brien is talking about, except for the fact that he's hearkening back to a time of incredibly horrible rhetoric that is straight out of Hitler's playbook. I mean, the fact is, Sean O'Brien is, and this is not hyperbole, he is expressing views that are incredibly dangerous, that are supportive of fascism. He's calling out elites in this kind of vague sense and making it into a discussion about how the Teamsters are going to work in a bipartisan fashion. You can't work in a bipartisan fashion with fascists. The other thing that I wanted to say, especially on the issue of our trans workers, we have trans workers at UPS. We have trans workers throughout the Teamsters. They exist everywhere. I am a gay man, but there are trans folks, and I support them in solidarity. He said that Josh Hawley was 100% correct. Well, Josh Hawley has been attacking corporations that support uh, their trans workers. He said that it's a religion. That this is, trying to destroy our children. Elon Musk recently is moving all of his corporations out of California because of a law that California Governor Gavin Newsom signed that bars school districts from requiring staff to notify parents of their gender identity. So it protects young people from abuse, transphobic abuse at home. So what we're seeing is the uh, weaponization of social causes against groups that are most vulnerable: immigrants, trans folks, people who are clearly outside of what Trump considers and the Republican Party the natural social order. This is not a hyperbole to say this is fascism. And Sean O'Brien put himself right there and said that these people are 100% correct. I'd also like to point out that the Teamsters social media manager put out a statement condemning our international president. That was up for 1 hour, condemning the misogyny, the racism, the toxicity, the transphobia, and then of course it was deleted. So I'm glad whoever did that in DC, whoever put that up, I salute you. I am very proud that that was put up there because it shows that the wheels on this bus are coming off. But we must say firmly, there is no room in the labor movement for fascism. And Sean O'Brien has shown himself to be a neo-fascist, reactionary, white supremacist, transphobe, and he has to go.
And this issue of attacks by the Republicans on blacks, on immigrants, apparently for Sean O'Brien, it doesn't matter if you're a racist. It doesn't matter if you attack immigrants. And there are many immigrants who are members of the Teamsters Union. It doesn't matter if you attack Asians and are working towards world war. He said that the United States should go, basically, he says, on a war footing, which is what the Trump administration would do. And more militarization. And the issue of fascism is not being debated and discussed in the labor movement. Whoever becomes president, there is a fascist movement. Why do you think that the unions, the AFL-CIO and the union, most of the union leaderships are afraid of even discussing what fascism is?
I think a lot of them are being caught, in a sense, in the old paradigm pre-Trump, that necessarily this fascist movement, which we've seen building for over a decade, first with the Tea Party movement. I mean, but a lot of these folks have been circulating around, but they've become more and more organized. They become organized in a way that is incredibly frightening. And there are some intellectual underpinnings behind some of this. At some point, you and I will have a discussion, not now, but about Nick Land. He's a neo-reactionary philosopher, part of the Dark Enlightenment movement, very inspiring to these people because he believes that AI is capitalism from the future coming back to create, going back into the past to create itself. So essentially, he is supporting these let it rip deregulation neo-fascists because it gets to the point of the super intelligent AI, which will then transcend the human. So he's not necessarily a white supremacist because he doesn't believe in human. He's a AI supremacist. He believes that AI should take over. And you see this in sections of the techno-fascist billionaires. They're not necessarily fascist in the classical sense. And I think that the neo-fascist movement is a reason why the labor movement is having a hard time getting its mind and getting its collective organizing around it because it's a new formation because of the way in which it's formulated. It does harken back to some of the worst moments in the 20th century, but it has a new context, a new level. And I think, unions like SEIU, Liz Schuler at the AFL-CIO, they're putting their money largely behind supporting the Democrats, as if this is the standard model of how you sort of fight a reactionary Republican candidate. This is not a standard election. We have an election now where one party is completely and totally fascist, and probably even if Joe Biden won, wouldn't accept the outcome of the election and would create and continue to create violence on a scale that would be terrifying. Now, if that fascism becomes institutionalized in the term of a Trump pres in the sense of a Trump presidency and potentially a Republican House and Congress, then it's just an accelerant to the process that's already underway. And so I think that is potentially one of the reasons why the contemporary labor movement is finding itself in a space where it's a little soporific, it's a little sleepy on this matter because it doesn't necessarily grasp the historical difference between the election of 2008 and the election of 2024, which there is qualitative and quantitative differences.
And as you know, there was an effort to get rid, a successful effort to get rid of Kerry after the UPS strike. And the government accused him of corruption. He later won his case. He was not corrupt, but they removed him after having a successful strike against UPS. And now you have the UAW under monitor, where the monitor is telling them that they should not support the Palestinians. They shouldn't take a position for a ceasefire, and they're charged of corruption. What do you think the likelihood is that if Trump becomes president, he will use these agencies? You'll appoint Turning Point USA people and fascists to these agencies, and they'll put the UAW in trusteeship and go after, Sean Fain and other officials who challenge the positions of the Republicans and the Democrats.
I think this is a very critical point because the first thing that Donald Trump will do is take over the executive branch when he becomes president, and that includes the Department of Justice. And the Department of Justice is responsible for prosecuting crimes. And the Department of Justice right now doesn't necessarily have a bunch of political hacks in there. Donald Trump's plan is to remove all of those civil servants and put in his own people. Now, that allows the Department of Justice to wield its power and influence against his enemies. And one of those people would probably be on the top of the list would be Sean Fain, the UAW president. So on top of the monitor, which is independent, I think you'll probably see the possibility, as you said, of trusteeship, but even more severely, the possibility of something like what happened with Ron Kerry, but even more forceful through the Department of Justice, um, charges against Sean Fain based on irregularities or whatever may be happening in the UAW. That could definitely happen. Trump will go after his enemies, his perceived enemies, using the levers of the executive branch of the federal government, which includes the Department of Justice. And the Department of Justice can indict, prosecute, and imprison people. And so it's important for people to understand that he will use every lever and every means necessary to exact revenge on people that he's perceived that he believes have opposed him. And Sean Fain has been um, regardless of what we feel about Joe Biden. He's been very supportive of Joe Biden, and I think that is going to put a very serious. It's going to make a very serious problem for the UAW and the UAW's newly elected leadership. Of course, there are disagreements within the UAW about the process of the election, about Sean Fain, but that should be dealt with by UAW members, not by a fascist president with a weaponized Department of Justice.
And the AFL-CIO, most unions in this country are business unions. They support the Democrats and Republicans. They support capitalism. They support imperialism. And there is an organizing drive going on. Now, if Trump puts in people into these agencies, the NLRB, who are against having any more elections, it's going to virtually shut down. What do you think about the possibility of elections, for example, at Amazon? What's the likelihood of having elections when he's going to basically shut down these agencies which conduct elections because they don't believe that there should be elections, and they don't want workers to have unions at Amazon and other big companies?
This is the part that makes Sean O'Brien's speech, even the flirtation and then the roundtable with Trump in January, and then this love speech where he calls him one tough SOB, so ridiculous. Because the notion that Trump is somehow going to support labor unions is absolutely insane. We have to understand that Donald Trump is a candidate who's being supported by Elon Musk to the tune of $45 million a month, as you mentioned. Elon Musk is currently suing to abolish the National Labor Relations Board. These people want to destroy the NLRB completely, which is the only vehicle right now workers have to organize an actual collective bargaining unit and fight, not as individuals, but as a collective. Sean O'Brien kept saying individuals can't go up against corporate America. That's right, Sean. Individuals can't go up against corporate America. That's why we have unions. And maybe you shouldn't be speaking and praising the biggest union busters in the country who want to institute a free-for-all right-to-work nonsense throughout the country. And of course, he's, made some references to Josh Hawley's supposedly road to Damascus moment. But of course, Hawley is supported by the billionaires, and Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, especially now we know that J.D. Vance is the vice presidential candidate, come out of the Silicon Valley money. They're being supported by the technofascists, the most powerful, wealthiest individual to ever live, who is wanting to destroy workers' rights, who's moving his companies around so that they can be in the least worker-friendly states, so that they can be in the places that are most regressive, in the places that are most socially backwards, is pumping $45 million a month into the Trump campaign. He's not doing that out of the goodness of his heart. He's doing that because he knows he's going to get a return on his investment. Now, if Sean O'Brien thinks that his little speech in front of that Nazi rally is going to make things better for workers, then, he's completely deluded. Basically, what Sean O'Brien is doing is he's putting himself in a position whereby he's lining himself up to be what the unions, the fascist unions, were under Mussolini. This combination of the union and the state, and that he may have some connection and some kind of officialdom within a fascist government, a neo-fascist government, a neo kind of Nazi neo-fascist government. And that's exactly what this Republican convention is about. And speaking there certainly didn't do anything to advance workers' rights. It's absolutely insane.
And this normalcy that Sean O'Brien did, that this Democrats and Republicans, and you can go to both parties and speak, and you can get some justice. Both parties are supported by people, cryptocurrency, the people who want to sell this and don't want any regulation. What do you think about the effect of total financial deregulation, which is what the cryptocurrency people want? The billionaires that funded not just Trump, but also funded Schiff in California. They didn't want any regulation. What would that mean to working people? Because it seems like this speculation, capital speculation, frenzy of speculation in the stock market could lead to a complete collapse.
Yes, I mean, what we're seeing now is an acceleration of technofascists who are supporting the Republican candidates because they are at the leading edge of deregulation and acceleration. Accelerationism, they pushing things forward as fast as possible, let it rip. The Democrats have a kind of milquetoast, mealy mouth. Oh, we'll have a little bit of discussion, maybe this, maybe that. And it, suits the ruling class just fine if they're in power too, but it's better for their interests. Clearly, they wouldn't put $45 million a month of their own money behind it for these let it rip Republicans to be in office. So it's important for workers to understand there is a qualitative difference between the two parties. However, both parties are beholden to the ruling classes of the United States, the parties of capital, or the people who are capitalists. That's very important to understand. Right now, we have one party in particular that is willing to take that to the next to the extreme, to the complete extreme, that in the notion that there should be any protections for workers, the notion that there should be any protections for the environment, the notion that there should be any protections for civil rights, human rights, it completely abolished by Project 2025, which is the Heritage Foundation project that's in place for the Republicans to initiate after they take office. Regardless of who wins in November, there will continue to be a fight between working people and the capitalists. But I think it's important to note that right now there is a huge section of the ruling class, these techno billionaires, that are putting their money behind the Republican candidates because they see them as the vanguard of the capitalist assault on workers. Not just in terms of these social issues, which are very important, but in terms of also the actual workers' rights and organizing. I mean, Elon Musk, again, is moving his companies. I think that one of the pretexts was the protection for trans children, but he's been long having arguments and fights with regulators in California about basic protections around COVID when they wanted to shut down his plant so that people wouldn't get infected with COVID, around OSHA violations. So it's easier for him to move to a state like Texas, which is on the vanguard of destroying workers' rights. I think it's important to understand this because these are the people that are backing the Republican National Convention. These are the people that are backing Republican candidates throughout the country. And they're weaponizing social issues to create divisions within the working class. It's very important. There isn't a white working class, a black working class. There's a working class. And the Republican Party right now is weaponizing divisions, social divisions, that are really, really not threats to the workers, but they're weaponizing it through the hateful media circus that they have, Fox News, Breitbart, New York Post, in order to separate workers, in order to create divisions among workers, in order to scare workers about transgender people, about immigrants, about a number of issues that, oh, they want to take away your car and make you ride the bus, and they're going to make everybody drive electric vehicles. I mean, these notions, these kinds of insane notions are being run through the media echo chamber of the right wing. And it's important to note that embracing that, as Sean O'Brien did, does nothing to advance the interests of workers. We need to be uniting workers around issues that involve our class interest, and also making sure that we support and encourage diversity, inclusion, and equity within the labor movement. Diversity, inclusion, and equity are not beholden to corporations. DEI is not a corporate. We can't allow the corporations to take it and turn it into some top-down nonsense. We need diversity, equity, and inclusion because of the histories of oppression in this country. We need one from the bottom up, not just from the top down. And so it's important that we have that. Unfortunately, right now, we have a president of our union who is courting some of the most backward elements of our society.
And the need for a united front that you're talking about against racist attacks, against fascism. I mean, you have millions of people that have guns, machine guns. If Trump comes to power, they'll be emboldened, and he may give them a free hand, go out and kill people. This is the realm of possibility and likelihood if you have a Trump administration. There doesn't seem to me any call for a united front of the working class to protect against any kind of assaults and attacks on blacks, on browns, on immigrants, on Asians, and on the unions. And the AFL-CIO president, Liz Schuler, is trying to prevent the Vermont AFL-CIO leadership from an election. They called for a general strike against any attempted coup and insurrection. What you had at this Republican convention is actually support for a coup and insurrection. They actually supported the attempted coup and insurrection of 2006. So you have a government actually and a Supreme Court who said that those were official acts, so therefore they can't be prosecuted, who are saying that actually a dictatorship, a fascist dictatorship, is okay under the law.
Yes. So the January 6, 2021 riot insurrection, which was an attempt to stop the certification of the election of 2020, whereby Trump encouraged his followers to go and disrupt that event and then cause trouble. And then when he found out they were chanting "Hang Mike Pence," a number of his aides have reported that he supported that notion to hang his own vice president. I think Americans are still processing what that means, and then on the right, they've sort of reframed it as these people are political martyrs. They're political prisoners, which you'll remember that Trump actually had some of them singing over the phone from prison at some of his rallies. Um, And these are the types of people who were willing to go and commit serious acts of violence to stop the certification of the election. And they're going to be pardoned by Trump if he becomes president. They're Trump's allies. And they represent a small segment of the heavily armed paramilitary groups in this country who are aligned with the Trump movement through far-right ultranationalist behavior, groupings. There are a number of these tendencies, and as you said, there are millions of people with guns. There, I think the United States has more guns per capita than any other country except for Yemen. So the country is awash in guns. Um, and the country is awash in, it's a tinderbox right now. It's a tinderbox, and anything could explode. I I also want to remark about the attack that was inspired by some of the Trump rhetoric on the immigrants at the Walmart in Texas. It was a couple years ago. Um, there there have been attacks, assaults. The attack in Kenosha in I think it's Wisconsin, on by Kyle Rittenhouse, I think it was his name, a vigilante who went out as a right-wing person and shot and was supported by the far right. Um, there are far right people who are very much inspired by this movement and have gone out and committed acts of violence, including murder already. That is only going to be accelerated as Trump continues to take a larger stand on the national platform. And he continues to spew his nonsense, uh, as did almost every speaker at the RNC, about immigrants killing and maiming people every single day. I mean, this is what they've been saying. If you've been watching the convention, it's complete madness. You know, it's a madness, it's dangerous, and it's inciting all types of violence. Unfortunately, I can only speak for the Teamsters Union. There has been no response to that kind of hate mongering. The only response that we've had is Sean O'Brien going and cuddling up with these types of horrible politicians. And I think that shows that he's disqualified himself from being a leader in the labor movement. Because if he can't even stand up against fascism now, then what will be the situation when Trump and these folks actually become institutional leaders? So they actually institutionalize fascism at the highest levels of government. Um, I I don't think Sean O'Brien will be there to protect any worker. And so it's very unfortunate. He's it's a sad day for the labor movement. Um, he's sold something very precious, which is the power of 1.2 million Teamsters um, to the neo-reactionary fascist movement that is incredibly dangerous. And I think that he's disqualified himself from being a leader.
And the issue of a political alternative, I mean, the two choices being given the American people in this election, the major parties, the Democrats and Republicans, Trump and Biden, there seems to be a major political vacuum in the United States and in other countries, that, for that matter, of any kind of working class, mass, democratic political alternative. What do you think is a way to solve that? Because working people really don't have a choice. Many feel that's why many don't vote in the United States.
We definitely need a labor party. We need a party that's backed by the labor movement. We all have disagreements within the labor movement. We all have disagreements about the way in which our unions are led. But the one thing that Farrell Dobbs talked about when he was working with the AFL back when it was super reactionary, I mean, this is before it merged with the CIO in the 30s, what at least they had the organization, which is a start. They had the organization, and the one thing that workers are always doing in any society, classical understanding of left-wing politics, is that we are always competing with each other. And that's why we join in with each other in unions to make sure that we aren't competing with each other, that we're working together. And even the most backward and reactionary unions are organizations of workers that are united together in some fashion. And that's a start. That's a start. And we have to use that. That's a building block that we can use to create a labor party. And of course, it's not, labor can't win this alone. We have to make allies with the environmental movement. We have to make allies with folks that are differently able, people that can't work, the unemployed, folks that are unhoused. We have to make a lot of times the workers that are unhoused. We have to make broad coalition with many different groups, LGBT groups, Black civil rights groups, as you know, the late Howard Williamson always talked about the NAACP and the importance of working with the NAACP, the importance of working with these groups that have been around for a very long time, fighting for civil rights. Labor needs to move into a united front coalition with these groups and create a Labor Party. Now, between now and November, there's not the time to do that, but we need to be doing that for the next election cycle. We need to be doing that now. We need to be building it now so that we're prepared, we're ready to go throughout the country, and also building solidarity with the international working class, because economic nationalism is not going to solve the problem. We don't want to go the way of, say, the Labour Party of the UK, whereby it's economic nationalism. We want to have a internationalist movement. And I think that it starts with the labor movement, and we have to branch out and create connections throughout the world. And that's the only way that we can advance any type of change. And that's a long-term strategy that involves a lot of coalition building, a lot of organizing, and a lot of hard work. Unfortunately, the current union leadership isn't willing to do that, so it's got to be a bottom-up movement that happens from the workers within. And a few good leaders may be able to take the reins as well or be pushed in that direction. And then we can move forward with a labor movement with the Labor Party. Between now and November, the choice is pretty stark. I will let folks decide how they want to vote. Obviously, I don't want folks to be voting for the fascists, but in terms of the alternatives between now and November, there are differences on the left of how to tactically keep the fascists out of the highest levels of government. And I will let folks decide on how they want to do that.
Okay, I want to thank you, Tony, for joining us today on this important discussion about the political ramifications of Teamster President Sean O'Brien visiting and speaking at the Republican convention, the rise of fascism, what it means for the working class, for other people, blacks, gays, LGBTQ, and what working people need to do to defend themselves in a coming period, which likely are going to have a fascist movement in control of the government. So thanks for joining us on Work Week.
Thank you, Steve.